This podcast is sponsored by nobody.
Hey y'all, it's Jillian McWhirter. I played Allison in After Midnight, amongst other movies. Right now, you are listening to the one and only Tommy Throwback Kovac on Splat from the past. This dude knows everything, and he's a very good joke teller. Stay tuned.
Hey dudes, welcome to Splat from the Past, the only 80s themed horror sci-fi show where things could get totally radical. Now today, I will be welcoming the one, the only, Brian Patrick Clarke. You all knew him from Eight Is Enough back in the day, playing Merle the Pearl. And he was also on General Hospital. He was on the short-lived Animal House series, Delta House. And of course, he was in Sleepaway Camp II, Unhappy Campers. And we're going to talk about all of that stuff today. The guy is a legend, handsome stud of a guy who's been in so much great work. It's going to be great to talk to him today. And October 12th is taking full effect. I just love this month of October, talking to people who have been in horror movies, people who are known for horror movies, but just horror in general. It is just friggin' amazing. So, here is my interview with Brian Patrick Clarke. This is such a great honor. Thank you so much for taking the time today.
Hey, man, I'm happy to join the minions, and I mean, maybe I should have said the millions of folks you've interviewed, some very, very interesting people. And, more power to you. It's wonderful that you have decided to take the initiative the way you have.
Oh, my pleasure. Yes, it's been a wonderful, wonderful ride, I have to say. So, going back in time, did you gravitate toward acting early on in your childhood?
No. I actually did one play by happenstance more than anything. My senior year of high school, my high school English teacher was writing a play called An Evening with Samuel Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
And he decided, to me, out of the thin blue air, that I'd be a very good choice with Samuel Johnson. And, we rehearsed it for whatever period of time we did. I think there were about 5 or 6 of us in the cast. And we did it one weekend, 2 performances. I had a lot of fun doing it. And I certainly, said, well, I'm glad I did that. But it wasn't like it was planted there. However, when I was 10 and we were living on Long Island, I don't even remember why, but I had asked my mother if I could take acting classes somewhere, and she enrolled me in a program at the Mineola Playhouse.
Right.
We were living in Plainview, and I think it lasted about 2, maybe 3 weeks total. It was more of a passing whim, fancy, whatever. It was never a passion per se. So I did play drums from the time I was not quite 12 when the Beatles hit.
Right.
And I for a long time I'd entertained the notion that, wow, man, I'd love to be a rock and roller. But I also had another universe in which I was able to quote unquote perform, and that was sport. So I think there was always some part of me that I know there was always some part of me, because I was also a class clown that liked having an audience, but I really had not anticipated that I would become in a singular, focused way committed to becoming an actor. Until, frankly, I was almost 24. I arrived in Los Angeles on my 24th birthday,
Right.
having just decided about 6 or 7 months before that I was going to quit the very viable corporate world, Fortune 500, young management guy on the rise, and go into something as obscure as well. I'm going to move out to Los Angeles. I'm going to become an actor.
And you had attended Yale. You played football there?
Yes, I did. And the first agent I had in Los Angeles decided that putting down Yale BA, but leaving out that it was a psychology BA, would lead. And this is kind of like Trump when he talks about going to Wharton. He talks about Wharton. He always says Wharton. He never says University of Pennsylvania. There's a reason. Saying Wharton implies in most people's minds that he got an MBA from one of the best business schools in the world, Wharton, at the University of Pennsylvania. He didn't. He had 2 years as an undergrad at Fordham before he was finally able to buy his way into the University of Pennsylvania, which consists of 4 undergraduate colleges, one being Wharton undergrad, one being the College of Nursing, one being applied engineering, or engineering and applied sciences, and the other one being arts and sciences, which is basically liberal arts. So, I mean, this is what this buffoon does, but in a parallel universe, in much less of an impactful way, my agent decided putting Yale BA on my resume would just lead people to the conclusion that perhaps I had studied at the Yale School of Drama, which I hadn't. So, I remember being asked by Blair Brown, a very, very accomplished actress who had a great theater background and had a significant career for quite some time.
Continental Divide.
I'm sorry, what?
She was in Continental Divide with John Belushi.
Yeah. Immediately, it's fine. We must have telepathically had that exchange because I was even thinking about the campaign, the advertising campaign with her and Belushi. But, I worked with her on Eleanor and Franklin, the White House years, which was the first job I got, the first theatrical job. And I was playing John Roosevelt, the youngest son, and in conversation with her, I think I really got busted when she was asking me what theaters I performed in the area while at Yale. Right? Because she'd worked at the Schubert, she'd worked at the Long Wharf. I mean, she knew the routine. It was like, well, we that, and then the other, and let's not forget that other one. Yeah. So, fortunately, she was nice enough not to look me in the eye and go, dude, you are full of shit. Don't let people catch you like this.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, most actors, when they're starting, they lie on their resume, and
Yeah.
I think often, though, if producers or whoever finds out that you're lying, that's when they know they can trust you because they lie too.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's actually the title of a wonderful book. Oh my gosh, is his name going to elude me right now? Adventures in the Screen Trade. Sadly, I think William Goldman.
Oh yeah.
The dean of writing, the dean of screenwriting.
Yes, he is.
And he actually had a book, and it's a very funny story he tells about how he came upon the title, Which Lie Did I Tell? And he's not talking about himself specifically. He's talking about meeting with some, producer in Vegas in the guy's penthouse suite, and the guy's trying to, because Goldman was always in demand.
Right.
He picked his moments, and he made significant sums of money, but he remained a college professor in Ohio as really his vocation. And he was sitting there because when he got to the producer's penthouse suite, the guy was on the phone, like wheeling and dealing and throwing out all kinds of names and numbers. And, Goldman thought, well, I don't want to sit here like I'm actually listening to this shit. So he picked up a magazine and just started leafing through it. He started reading that. And a few minutes passed by, and all of a sudden there's a lull in the conversation that he only is dimly aware of. And he feels a tap on his shoulder, and he turns, and this producer is looking at him, covering the mouthpiece on the phone, saying, Bill, which lie did I tell? The guy had told so damn many lies in the course of that few minutes that he couldn't remember which one he had told.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I long ago used to say about Hollywood that the prevailing ethos tended to be, don't bust me on my bullshit, and I won't bust you on your bullshit.
Exactly. That was well put.
Yeah. At least with respect to credits, IMDb has kind of rectified that. But it's also funny when you read bios. You read somebody's bio on IMDb, and it's somebody who might have had a really significant career, and there's maybe like 2 or 3 sentences, And there's a guy guy in L.A. I'm thinking of right now. And it stunk to high hell. Every time I'd read his bio, it was like running into the dude. Every time I ran into him, he had a new line of bullshit about what he was working on and what he had in the fire, and the people were, trying to sign him up. And I read his friggin' bio, intermittently, and I go, oh my God, this guy writes as if he's had a career grounded in the Royal Shakespeare Company, and he's an icon in the community or something. He's just full of shit, full of shit, which made him perfect for Hollywood.
Yeah. I interviewed a guy, he's a horror host out in the Bay Area, and he had this fake IMDb of like being a crew member on all these movies that were shot in Australia. He told me he lived there for many years before coming back to the Bay Area. And I found out later just how bogus he was. He was on the People's Court recently. He was suing somebody, and then he ended up having to pay $20,000 because the judge wasn't buying it. Yeah.
Well, the good news for him is that because he agreed to do the People's Court, they actually make payment, and I don't think they would pay as high as $20,000. But when parties agree to do People's Court, what's happening is they are agreeing to accept whatever the determination is made by the judge, and they will not be paid for their time. And I lived through this experience myself with a real piece of work. I don't even want to remark on how and what, but she was a friggin' troll. She should have lived under a bridge. Yeah. And she defrauded Kathy and me out of money. And ultimately, it was a friggin' nightmare, man. And she clearly had approached the People's Court about it because Kathy was a quote-unquote celebrity. Yeah. And she wanted an opportunity to absolve herself of the debt. And I actually was tempted. And it was Kathy who said, no, for God's sakes, we're not going to do that. We're not going to go on the People's Court to give her moment in the sun. Yeah. Yeah, so I know that you do have the benefit of knowing that if you lose, there's the sigh of relief about, wow, not going to be my skin.
Yeah, everybody I know was pretty happy that he lost that case.
Sounds like the guy was past due for a couple of losses.
Yeah, it's going to continue. But I was curious, what position did you play in football?
Well, I went there, as I regularly now have to say to qualify that I actually played football. I went there as a fullback linebacker who was 220 pounds as a freshman. I'd been a 212-pound fullback linebacker in high school. But I ended up as a straight-on place kicker, which anybody who doesn't remember the great Lou Groza or even George Blanda for the Raiders, people forget that once upon a time, football players kicked footballs, not guys who came off of soccer fields and happen to have extraordinary pop in their legs, can kick balls 90 yards. We actually played football, and I went there with every expectation that I would do what I'd done in high school. I kicked off in high school. We didn't attempt field goals. I had a very conservative coach. I'd do them in practice, but we never attempted one. But when I got to Yale in my first game as a freshman, I was actually the starting fullback. I had a 12-yard touchdown that I thank God a teammate a year or so ago called and said, "Hey, my dad sent me a clipping from 1970 when we were freshmen, and man, I'd forgotten that you actually, yeah, I did. I actually did. Yes, I had a 12-yard TD, but I also had the first two field goals I ever attempted. And one of them was from 47, the first one, and the second one was from 43. And I hit them both. And this was, 50-plus years ago, so those were pretty significant kicks. And then I won the next game on a field goal. And won 2 games later, I won a game against Dartmouth on a field goal. And then I had against Princeton a couple of field goals, and one of them was from 50 yards. So, it was like, it was great for me in many respects because I knew that when I got to varsity, I owned that spot. But, I went to Yale to play football. I didn't go there to kick footballs exclusively. The problem being that there was value in the points I could put on the board, and consequently it was, this is what he's going to do. The only benefit I did have is that I refused to play safety on kickoffs, which is the way it used to be. And it is now all the time. You'll never see anybody but the kicker playing safety, other than making sure you have somebody back who can actually tackle, because a lot of these guys have never played football per se, and they can't tackle. And if they push somebody out of bounds on a sideline, it's like, oh, thank God. But I refused to play safety on kickoffs, so we actually changed the way we kicked off. We switched to kicking from the right hash, and I would kick in between the hash and the sideline and try to force a short side return more often than not, which would put me in the thick of it. So, yeah, long-winded explanation, though, for why, I have to qualify it, because, honest to God, man, a part of me wants to go, no, I did not skip out on the field with a sparkling clean uniform and have my 3 seconds and exit stage right, I mean, I'm not demeaning the guys kicking footballs now. They're unbelievable.
Right.
But you got kids coming up, and that's what they do. I mean, some of them come from soccer. Some of them just come up kicking footballs. And the talent is unbelievable. But there's another part of me that does find it odd that games can come down to a kick made by someone who has not taken a hit the entire almost 60 minutes, whose uniform is, as I said, sparkling clean, who maybe ought to be winning a punt, pass, and kick contest instead of winning football games. It's almost like kickoffs. Kickoffs now, though it was really exciting this last week in Texas A&M, Devin A-Chain, one of their great halfbacks, one of the great running backs, returned to kick 96 yards against Alabama. And this dude is a two-event All-American sprinter, 100 and 200 meters. So it was like, when he got a bit of daylight, it was like, you can kiss that one goodbye. There's nobody on your team, Saban, who's going to run this dude down. But, for the most part, what happens on a kickoff now? The ball gets kicked out of the back of the end zone.
Right.
I mean, it's like, do we really need to spend that time watching somebody kick the ball out of the back of the end zone? Why don't we just put it on the 25 and let the game commence?
I know. I can't get into watching football at all these days, because to me it's all about advertising and overpaying the athletes. And it just takes the fun out of watching a game now, I think.
You know what's funny? On the NFL level, I can fully agree with you, though I would love to.
So when you moved to LA, did you study acting with any teachers out there?
Best thing that ever happened to me was truly the best thing. I began as a tour guide at Universal Studios. That was not the best thing, but it's fun, man. And it was like, hey, okay, I'm in the business. Yeah. But I was very quickly signed by. She was the top modeling agent on the West Coast at the time, Nina Blanchard.
Oh, yeah.
Nina Blanchard, had Renee Rousseau, Christy Brinkley, Cheryl Teagues. She was, Kathy Ireland. And I had been referred to Nina, not to Nina herself, but I'd been directed to go to Nina's, though I had no modeling experience. I had no acting experience. I happened to be a quote-unquote all-American type, dramatically smaller than when I'd been playing football, which certainly helped, because sure as hell not going to be modeling anything except gym attire if you're 220 pounds. But the director of the tour division at Universal had said to me, listen, you're 24 years old, you got a Yale degree, you didn't come out here to be a tour guide. What is it you want to do? I told her, I said, well, I'd like to try to become an actor. And she said, you got to go see Nina Blanchard. You have a very commercial look, et cetera, et cetera. And I tried to make an appointment over the phone with Nina's. I got rejected because I was over 21. I was not in the guild, not interested, okay? When I went back and I told the tour director that, his name was Ricky Bush, I remember, very nice lady. She said, I didn't tell you to call. I told you to go see.
Yeah.
Okay. So I went in there. It was actually very intimidating, though kind of funny. I had a friend who had shot some photos of me, and I got them printed at like Walgreens, one of the drugstores, and so I had on one of my business shirts, with the pocket, and I put those 3x5 photos in my pocket, so I got my photos, about a half dozen photos, in my upper left pocket, and I walk into Nina's office, which was at Hollywood and Vine at the time now, where that Kovac Theater is.
Yeah.
And she was on like the 8th or 9th floor, I think. But no, that was the after office was on the 9th floor. She was like 3rd or 4th. But I walk in there, and there's about, 8 or 10 seats facing this little half wall with a swinging gate, and then you got the glassed in offices, and then you got some other people working at their desks, and the people sitting in those seats are all sitting there with portfolios under their arms, and they're all strikingly attractive, and it's like, wow, what the hell did I just walk into? I got my 3x5s in my shirt pocket, and these people have like the real stuff,
Yeah.
But I wasn't even allowed to sit down. I don't remember whether there was an empty seat or not. The receptionist, who was behind that wall, said, "Can I help you?" I said, "Yes, I'd like to see Nina Blanchard." And she said, "Well, what are you?" I'd like to see if I could get representation. And she said, "Are you in the Guild?" I said, "No, I'm not, Screen Actors Guild." And then she said, "Well, how old are you?" I said, "I'm 24." She said, "I'm sorry. You're over 21. You're not in the Guild. We're not interested." And I was literally moving back to the door.
Oh, boy.
Probably almost had my hand on it. And all of a sudden I hear this gravelly voice call out, wait a minute. And it's Nina, who was back behind her glass enclosed, office window, and happened to look out, and next thing I know, she's whisking me into her office, and she had the director of the commercial division, the director of the print division, and, they had just started the theatrical division, and they're all seated there or hovering over me, telling me that I had to sign with them instead of so-and-so or so-and-so. And it's like, whoa, man, I came here to try to sell myself, and it seems to be working. I didn't do anything. So the thing, and this is a long answer again, that she did, the first thing she did for me, was send me to a wunderkind acting coach named Vincent Chase, whose name is actually invoked, I guess, in the what the hell is his name? Mark Wahlberg. So Entourage. And there is a Vincent Chase character, I guess. And that is derivative of Mark having worked with Vince on some of the films that he did. Vince was also, shortly after I got there, in fact, Michael Biehn and I got there about the same time, almost the same day, started with Vince. And then maybe a year or two after that, Bill Paxton was one of Vince's students. But, Vince was a very, very noted former studio acting coach back when they had the contract system. He'd been the contract coach at MGM. He had most recently been the contract coach at Universal, which was the last studio to have a studio system for training young actors. And I got really lucky, man. The guy was great, and I had like a 3-hour audition visit with him, where he said, "Listen, I think you can make a good living in this business, and I'll be happy to work with you." And I found out then, this was September of '76.
Yeah.
However, that tuition was $110 a month, and I didn't have any money at that point. Basically, I'd arrived in LA with $800 in my pocket. I'd gotten a dump of an apartment for $145 a month, furnished, single, on Normandy, in between Hollywood and Sunset, and my car insurance was just about due. So within a few weeks, I had to pay my car insurance, which basically was either 3 or 4 times what it had been while I was registered in Cleveland, Ohio. It was, holy God. By the time I turned around, man, I was in a deficit. I was working on MasterCard,
Yeah.
and the only credit card I had, and I just said to him, I said, well, I'm making $2.30 an hour as a tour guide, and when I finish the training program, I'll make $3.11, but I really don't have any money now, but I'd love to start with you when I finally get squared away. And here's the incredible thing, man.
Mm-hmm.
He was not a rich dude. He was a brilliant man, terrific acting coach, became
Right.
a very dear friend. He just looked at me and goes, you're going to do fine in this business. You're going to make a lot of money. I'll carry you. You just pay me when you've got the money. You pay me.
Right.
And he carried me for 10 months, even though I started working fairly quickly. I found out that in the business, you don't necessarily get paid real quickly. And even when you book a commercial that may end up making some money for you, what you got initially was a session fee. And I don't remember what session fees were at the time, but it was probably somewhere around $250, $275. And so you pay your agent, you pay some taxes, and you turn around and you just made rent, and that's about it. So it was 10 months before I was able to pay him, but it was a great feeling to walk in after 10 months and hand him a check for $1,100 and thank him.
Yeah.
And I never forgot how kind he was to me. I was hardly the only one he did that for. And Bill Paxton, I'm happy to say, was extraordinarily generous with Vince. Extraordinarily.
That's what I heard.
He so valued Vince's input that when he directed his golf film, I'm trying to remember what the hell the name of the film was, but Bill had a film that, it starred, what's his name? Oh, the guy who hurt his hand pretty severely in a car accident when the vehicle overturned on him. Kind of a cocky, young, talented, oh my goodness. If I could remember another film that he's done, I actually like him on screen, and I think he's kind of come around, but he starred in this film that Bill directed,
Mm-hmm.
and it was shooting up in Canada, and Bill insisted on Vince coming and working with the actors, and Vince being there as a second set of eyes for him.
Right.
I mean, not unlike, if you will, Warren Beatty always had Buck Henry on set because he valued Buck Henry's eyes. Not
Right.
just a very accomplished performer himself and writer, but a great set of eyes. So I know that to the day he died, sadly, at 63 years of age, Bill Paxton was incredibly generous with Vince and the things he would do for him.
Oh, that's good. So tell me about work.
It's what I think at least a few of us who, when we were working, we were happy we were able to do things for Vince. But sadly, man, there were some real scumbags who I know Vince carried and for whom Vince did so much. And man, they got their first gig, got a little bit of heat, and they never looked back and never remembered the debt they owed.
Oh, yeah, that goes with the territory, unfortunately, in this business.
Yeah.
So tell me about working on Eleanor and Franklin.
Well, it was, it was great, except it was also my first experience with the cutting room floor because I had one, reasonably nice scene with Jane Alexander
Mm-hmm.
during the inaugural ball, and by the time I went to the screening, it was gone, and most of what I'd done was gone, which kind of, I guess, I was alerted to in his own very nice way when I got there, and saw Dan Petrie, the director, and went over and introduced the guest I brought to him, and I said, I'm really looking forward to the screening. He goes, yeah, you're still in there. And I thought, oh, okay, well, what does that mean? See, I didn't realize that unlike my one experience on stage in high school, what you shoot is not necessarily what ends up on the screen.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I was still in there, but it was not the most edited I ever was. That took place on a guest spot on ER in 97 or 98, and it happened to be the episode where Julianne Margulies was giving birth.
Right.
And so those kinds of scenes always scenes, and it's going to involve some really expert editing, and so I never even thought about it, but I had told my mom that I had this guest spot on ER that I was psyched about. It wasn't like huge, but they paid me top of the show and treated me very well, and of course I knew I'd get lots of residuals on the thing. And my mom was living on the East Coast in Florida. We were on the West Coast, and I told her all about hey, it'll be airing, et cetera, et cetera. And about the time the show ends on the East Coast, I get a phone call from my mother, and she goes, "Is that your chin I just saw on ER?" And thank God for that chin, because it was one pass through as I was being wheeled out of the back of an ambulance on a gurney, and Juliana Margulies was being wheeled down the hallway in a hospital bed, and the gurney passed the hospital bed, and it was only by virtue of, because they did a lot of handheld, it was only by virtue of that tracking shot that I ended up still on the screen. And trust me, it did not end up on like a demo reel. What it did do, however, is because I remained in the show.
Right.
I did get residuals on it, and I got a lot of residual money over time for a pass-by with my chin.
Wow. Then you worked with another guest of mine, Paul Lynch, on Blood and Guts.
Yeah, that was an interesting experience for me, because it was the first time I'd done anything really consequential. And I was flown. It was Paul for whom I auditioned. The actor they had lined up had to drop out at the last minute. I don't even know why. And they really had some very talented people that Paul had signed. Gosh, they had Bill Smith, William Smith, great character actor, and a physical Superman. The real deal, not like, bullshit on screen. He was a Korean War veteran. He was a martial artist. He was a boxer. He was a bar brawler. He was brilliant. He spoke like 5 or 6 languages. He was in Army intelligence. And, he rode with Hell's Angels for a time.
Wow.
This was a guy who was in every way, shape, and form old school Hollywood, an honorary member of the Stuntmen's Association because of the many things that he did, including that whether it was Every Which Way You Can or Any Which Way But Loose, the bare knuckle fight that he had with Clint Eastwood on screen, which is kind of a classic. And it was after I'd worked with Bill, but Paul had Bill Smith lined up. He had Micheline Lonteau, who at that time was Ted Kotcheff's girlfriend and had been the star of Dirty Kravitz with Richard Dreyfuss, Canadian film, and also had, you know what? I'm going to have to call you back if you don't mind. Can we do that?
Oh, yeah.
It's from the hospital for tomorrow.
Okay.
I'll call you right back, Tommy.
Okay.
Bye.
Okay. Shit, I got to do 3 edits on him today. 3 edits. You're my 3rd guest from Delta House. I've talked...
Who were the others?
Peter Fox and Wendy Goldman.
Oh, yeah, sure. It's interesting because Peter actually had played football. I don't think he played at Harvard, but he played in high school with a couple of my teammates at Yale. They went to Loyola Academy in Chicago. Very good school, and also a very noted high school football program. So when I first met Peter, there was immediately that, connection, that affinity. And Wendy, I know, went on. I think she had a lot of success as a writer as well, didn't she?
Oh, yes, she did. Because she came from Second City and National Lampoon, and she did The Groundlings later. And, she's had an amazing career. She still does it whenever she can. She's been having health issues lately, but,
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. That show, unfortunately, I think if you go back to it, and for me, it was very disappointing because it was, it wasn't what I'd been told it was going to be. And I actually asked out with 3 episodes to go. And Matty Simmons was nice enough to let me out because he acknowledged to my agent, he said, I made promises that we didn't keep, and frankly, the show is going to get canceled anyway. The ratings were indicative of that, but I mean, I liked everybody on the show. I knew that it felt like slow death. And when you have been an unemployed actor not too long before, and you walk away from, I was being paid $3,500 per show, so you walk away from over $10,000 in 1978, you got to be pretty unhappy. So.
I know, because Animal House was a hard act to follow for TV. I mean, they did the same thing with Fast Times at Ridgemont High later.
It's impossible, man. And
yeah.
Not only that, but this was in a time when you had the family hour. It was 8 o'clock,
right.
7 o'clock Central. That was the family hour. And it was an unwritten agreement among the networks that you were going to put on family fare. Well, we were an 8 o'clock show, and we debuted behind Mork and Mindy at 8:30 on a Thursday. So we did great ratings. The first episode drew a 41 share, okay?
Right.
Well, anything following Mork and Mindy, you could have a blank screen, and it was going to do a 40 share. The next episode aired on the regular slot Saturday night at 8 o'clock. It did a 31 share. Now, at that point in time, you had to be pulling around to 30 if you were going to survive, because you had 3 networks doing 90, more or less, between them, cumulatively. So if you weren't pulling down, say, at least a 28, 29, 30-ish, you were in trouble. We did a 31, and man, from that point, it was a straight nosedive. And I was bored to tears. I was frustrated by what I actually had to do versus what Maddie Simmons had told me I was going to have to do. And here was the irony. I actually had committed to moving to New York. I was newly married to my first wife, Kay, at the time, and I was committed to moving to New York within weeks after doing the pilot, because the Greg Marmalard character was not originally in the pilot as a regular. It was, I had tested for Niedermeyer, but I hadn't gotten it. I then was offered the opportunity to play Marmalard, and it was literally like one day, can't remember, maybe 2, but I think it was one scene, and that was it. And I had then tested for Another World, the soap opera.
Oh, yeah.
Got the gig. I was all set to move to New York. My ex-wife and I were planning, this will be an adventure. This will be really cool. And all of a sudden, when the show was picked up by ABC, they decided that they wanted the Marmalard character as a regular, and they wanted me to play him. And I had to do like some fast shuffling when I had the conversation with my agent, and it was he who figured out what we could use, as I hate to say it, but it's kind of a ruse. Kay had just had some surgery. It was fairly routine, but it's still surgery. And the ruse became, his wife can't make this relocation at this point in time. And as a consequence, the kid he's profoundly concerned about leaving his newlywed wife back in Los Angeles while he relocates to work in New York. So would you possibly rethink, contractual commitment? And they did. They were very nice about it. That freed me up to go ahead and commit to Delta House, which I had a couple of phone calls from Maddie Simmons personally, telling me the great fun I was going to have, and we got Marmalard in the first episode. He's got a line like, I'm going for the Heisman Trophy, and it's like, he made it sound like a lot more of a character than proved to be. And by the time I was sitting with my thumb up my ass for like the 7th or 8th episode, they bought 13. I was just really fed up, man. This is bullshit.
Yeah.
And Maddie was nice enough when my agent called him. It was a different agent. I was with Dick Heckenkamp at the time, who ironically, his son, I didn't even realize, but he looked so much like him. I wish I could remember his last name right now. His first name is Spencer, and he's married to Dana Bash from CNN.
Huh. Yeah, I don't know.
Who I didn't realize was previously married to Jeremy Bash, the former CIA guy that you see frequently on MSNBC. But anyway, Heckenkamp's son has had great success as an actor. And Dick was a really good guy, cool guy, old school, came up in advertising, and he was a good schmoozer. And he called and he said to Matty, he said, here's the thing. And Matty said to him, he said, listen, I think the kid's nuts. He's going to get $10,000 for basically sitting around for the next 3 weeks. But, sure, I understand it. It hasn't been what he had hoped for. It hasn't been what we had hoped for. You can't do Animal House in a family hour television format.
Right.
You can do it now. With the kind of stuff that ends up on cable and
Netflix.
Shit, you can have everybody in Delta and Omega House nude the entire time, and you could still put it on air.
Yeah.
Not that you necessarily want the group of us on screen nude the entire time.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, God, it was crazy. So when you got on 8 is Enough, it was a popular show already and stuff. Were you familiar with it?
I wasn't. I was not a family show viewer as a rule, frankly. It aired, I think it was Wednesday at 8 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
And I was typically in acting class at that time. This was prior to having a VCR and being able to tape things and watch. It wouldn't have been my kind of viewing anyway. But I came to love the show and being a part of it. I knew I was stepping into a top 10 show, and that was a godsend. And ironically, if it hadn't been for my leaving Delta House when I did, I don't think I would have ever gotten It Is Enough. Because, I had the VP of talent at Universal was so pissed off. He was telling Heckenkamp, the kid will never work here again. In fact, he may not work in this town again. Boom, boom, boom. Anyway, right after I got out of Delta House, I got cast for one day to shoot in a pilot called The Jaegers. Wonderful. One scene with, oh my gosh, what is Brian Cranston's, what's her name? Robin, man, I'm getting old. No, not Robin Greer, Kathy. No, that's completely unrelated. Robin Greer, no, Robin. Oh gosh, you look it up, please. I'm out of my mind.
I'm looking it up.
I could look it up for me because, and I had worked with her on the last commercial I ever did, which was a Cool Ray Polaroid sunglasses commercial. That the three women were Karen Lamb, who had been Dennis Wilson's first wife.
Right.
And when they got divorced, she married Robert Lamb from Chicago. Then they split up, and she went back to Dennis Wilson. So Karen Lamb, who was a beautiful, ultimate California blonde, and it was, by a swimming pool, and we got our Cool Ray sunglasses and so on. So she and a beautiful Scandinavian actress who was supposed to become a huge star off of More American Graffiti, a young lady named Anna Bjorn.
Oh, yeah.
And Anna, she played Paul Lamatt's girlfriend, Swedish student exchange student.
Right.
And I know she did work, but it was not the career everybody was projecting, because More American Graffiti didn't do the kind of business that the original did.
Right.
But, she was also very noted as the Sassooning blonde with, shaking her head and the Sassoon haircut. So she was the other female on it. And then, Kathy, are you looking up Brian Cranston's? Please do, because I'm going to sound like a friggin' idiot that I'm doing a 69-year-old brain fart. Anyway, and then Robin, with whom I, as I say, I'd worked with her previously. So what? Yes, Robin Dearden.
Robin Dearden, yeah. I just saw it.
And
yeah.
she's a sweetheart. I haven't seen her or him in 30-plus years, but she's a sweetheart. And I would see her on commercial auditions fairly frequently. Really, really a nice gal. And I worked with her. She was a regular. She was signed as the series regular on this show, The Jaegers, that ultimately went on air for just a limited time, called Trouble in High Timber Country. And it was one of those famous switch shots. Eddie Albert played the patriarch of the family.
Yeah.
At the time the thing sold as a series, it was actually Andy Griffith who was playing the patriarch. But Robin, I had one scene with her, and I was her boyfriend, and I was a trucker. So now I'm in, one of those sleeveless down outer vests, and I've got on a flannel shirt and, long sleeve undershirt. And so it's just completely different look than Greg Marmalard, needless to say, and completely different character. And I know that if I had gone in, as I did ultimately, to ABC as the final choice for Merle the Pearl,
Mm-hmm.
if I had gone into the same people doing the casting for a very significant show, a hit show, and I'd gone in as, well, he was most recently Greg Marmalard on your failed series Delta House, there's no way in hell I would have been cast.
Mm-hmm.
I would have gone in as this preppy president of Omega House in their mind's eye, and I thank God that, that one scene I know made a difference. So ironically, if I hadn't left Delta House when I did, I wouldn't have done that scene, and I wouldn't have had that transition to substantiate that, oh yeah, he's more than just the Yale alum who happens to play preppies on screen. And ironically, playing Greg Marmalard, certainly the experience at an Ivy League campus worked. As you know, the writers came from Dartmouth. They came from a Dartmouth background.
Right.
But man, I was not that privileged class. I was, middle class Irish stock football player who happened to be a good student.
Mm-hmm.
But I was not the legacy. I was not the Richie Rich background. It was, so it's easy to be typecast. I know that it was a godsend that I did that gig on the Jaegers in between to get the opportunity. It is enough.
Was everybody like a family on set?
You know what? Everybody was very, very nice to me, which I marvel at as I look back because, when you've got a successful show, who wants to mess with an equation that's winning? And I became very good friends over time with Grant Goodeve in particular, and we were literally like weeks apart in age. And he went to school at Ithaca College, and I certainly knew Ithaca because of Cornell, and we played at Cornell 2 of my 4 years, away. And his dad had gone to Yale. He was a Connecticut native, so there was a certain commonality in age, in background. Obviously a very talented, very handsome guy.
Mm-hmm.
And it would have been very easy, I think, for him to resent me because it wasn't as if I was some competition. I mean, his character was so established and so loved. It's like, what? This guy's certainly not going to, take my audience. But it would have been very easy to feel like, well, wait a second, man, kind of stepping on toes here. And it wasn't at all the way that I was treated, and I did become very good friends with him. It was the second year, which was the last year of the show that I was on it, and I just started playing tennis because everybody on the show played tennis.
Yeah.
And he was great about, we'd go out and he liked rallying. So even though I was just learning to play tennis, I was pretty decent in terms of being able to keep a rally going, and I was physically fit. And he didn't really care about playing games or sets or initially. He just wanted to go out and rally. That's how you work on your strokes. But then, fortunately, after It Is Enough, when we both had significant interludes of unemployment, I can't begin to count the numbers of hours that Grant and I spent playing pickup doubles on various courts across the valley. Beeman Park in Studio City and Sherman Oaks Park on Hazeltine, and then there was I forget the name of the park. It actually was not a freebie, but it was on Whitsett near Ventura Boulevard, and there was another one, the Racket Center, that's now been torn down. It was at Vineland and Cahuenga, and it's now a big shopping plaza. So, we became very good friends. He had his wife Debbie had just given birth to their first child, and Katie is her name. I think they had 4 ultimately. But, it was a great experience in that regard. Everybody treated me well, sure.
Oh, that's good. So then you started doing soap operas, General Hospital, and then The Bold and the Beautiful. What made you get into soaps? Was that all that was offered to you?
Well, it wasn't all that was offered to me, but it had been offered to me, and it was a valuable lesson. As 8 Is Enough was about to go off the air, I went in to audition for a character. I won't mention the character, but on General Hospital. It's character they're going to be adding to the show. And I actually, Gloria Monty wanted me to screen test after auditioning me, but she basically said, do the test, the job is yours, okay?
Mm-hmm.
However, about the same time, I was sent over, and it was like 8 o'clock at night, and it was to Spelling Goldberg for their last project together. I didn't know this at the time, but there'd been falling out between Leonard Goldberg and Aaron Spelling, and that's when Spelling got into doing all of his things with Doug Kramer. But their last venture together was they were doing a pilot called The Protectors, and it was going to be a combination of The Rookies meets Dallas.
Right.
Okay? Crossover. And I wowed Aaron in particular, and I screen tested and got the gig, and I mean, they bent over backwards to get me working on the pilot. It was a 4-week shoot in April of '81, and I was literally finishing up my last week on Eight Is Enough, which was pretty heavy a show from Merle. And it was the first week of shooting a 4-week pilot, and it was the week they were shooting up at the police academy. So it was stuff that, was absolutely essential to the show. And it was like, well, he's under contract, that's folks, so you're not really going to have him that week. The UPM for Eight Is Enough, a man named John Perry, did an amazing job of working with Aaron Spelling's people to get the schedules coordinated so that I could work on both shows. And Aaron was actually so enthusiastic originally that he said, I don't care if I have to put him on a bicycle and bicycle him over there myself. I'll get him there. They doubled my salary off of Eight Is Enough. I had these, whoa, man, I'm going to be a big deal, and, and oh, man. And the gal who played my wife on the show, she later played Mandy on Dallas, a beautiful young former Miss USA, who was also Paul Morning's ex-wife, Deborah Shelton, and Kelly Harmon was a regular on it.
Right.
And Richard Lawson, very talented actor, went on and had a very nice career. We were a group of young rookie cops, and we had a sergeant, and this is where this story's going now. We had a sergeant who, ironically, was the at least third guy off of the gig. After Steve Forrest had passed and Lloyd Bridges had passed, this guy got hired to play Sergeant T.J. Hooker.
Shatner.
You got it, dude. You got it.
Yeah.
And we shot the 4-week pilot. I know Aaron was happy with the work because when I went to the wrap party with my wife, he made a point of coming over and telling my wife what a big star I was going to be, and yada, yada, yada. And he even had sent over a script that it was a TV movie that they were doing with Lonnie Anderson, and they were looking for somebody to play her boyfriend, but they just felt, in that combination. I did go over there and meet with Lynn Loring, who was their head of talent, but I just looked way too young. I looked more like her son than I did her boyfriend. Everything was copacetic. It didn't sell for the fall, but as you probably know, when you do a pilot, you have to sign 2 seasons of your option. And so it didn't sell for the fall, but they said, no, this is definitely going to be a mid-season backup. It'll go on air in December or January, but we can't let you out. I actually had a couple of shows that were on-air shows at the time that I had offers to do and didn't get to do because when my agent, Heckenkamp, would call over, the response was consistently the same. No, we need his options. Going to go as a mid-season. So trust me, man, I'm playing a lot of tennis at this point in time because I'm, sitting on my ass and waiting to find out when exactly I'm going to be working again.
Right.
And thank God, in November of 81, I was just really frustrated with what I was living, which was limbo. And I decided, I read about the great casting director, Joyce Selznick, who had died, and her partner, Jan McCormick, whom I they both happened to like me when I'd auditioned for them several times, and I thought, wow, you know what? Maybe I need a manager, man. Everybody's been telling me you can't depend on just your agent. You got to get a manager, and I knew that Jan and Joyce had managed Kurt Russell together. They managed his wife, Susan Feebly. It was he was married to. They had Brenda Vaccaro, Tim Reed, Daphne Reed. Michael. I knew this was her guy, David Hasselhoff.
Yeah.
Anyway, I put in a phone call to her, baby, I'd love to meet with you. Let's sit down and talk. And so, it was cool. And I decided, yeah, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to give it a roll. I'm going to sign with her. And she said, now, what's the story with the Protectors? Where does that stand? And this is like November of 81. And I said, Jan, I don't know. I mean, we finished the damn thing in April. I've never seen it, needless to say. We're now apparently a 90-minute pilot, and I don't know. And she said, you know what, Joyce and I were at ABC until Joyce got sick, and, let me make some phone calls over there and see what I can find out. And she calls me later, and she goes, baby, I got some bad news.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to series, but you're not going with it. I go, what? Now, I have been told for months, so you ask, why did they find the idea of a soap opera appealing a year later?
Yeah.
Having passed on what was a contract role when I had the option of doing The Protectors or doing General Hospital, and I find out the damn thing has been completely changed, and I would have read about it in the trades the next week for Ryan and Hollywood Reporter, when they came out with an announcement that T.J. Hooker was going to be rolling camera the first week of December, starring Bill Shatner and Adrian Zmed as his young. The only one of us that they picked up from the pilot was Adrian Zmed, who was a great guy, later played with him on the Hollywood All-Stars softball team. He's a talented dude, dancer, drummer, great-looking guy. He's the only one they picked up. I mean, Heather Locklear wasn't in the pilot. Richard Hurd was in the pilot. He went to series with it. But that whole group of rookie cops, man, we just got wiped out. And it became Shatner's friggin' ego.
Yeah.
His friggin' ego. And I just, I've never heard anything really good from people who worked with him for any extended period of time. But I've heard a lot of negative. And so Adrian told me at one point in time, he said, man, best thing that ever happened to you was not going to series with it.
Yeah.
It's like, and yet look at it, Shatner continues at 90 to have a career because there's some people who play by no rules. They think only about themselves. They don't care how many bodies they leave in their wake. They consider it a win, whereas if you want to play with some measure of ethos or ethics in play, you're basically hamstringing yourself. So, anyway, what happened then, I then was with Jan, and, time passed. I ended up doing a guest spot or two. I did a guest spot on King's Crossing, in 82, where I actually played just the one episode, Linda Hamilton's boyfriend, and Mitchell Ryan's son, which was kind of cool because I knew him, growing up, and this was, of course, before Terminator turned Linda into a huge star, much less Cameron's wife. But it was really, really slow, man. It was very frustrating. And all of a sudden, this opportunity opened up at General Hospital, where we had a phone call directly from the casting guy, Marvin Page, a Hollywood legend. And he was very disappointed that I passed on it, a year and a half earlier. And they persuaded me to come in and test for this character. And boom, boom, boom. Anyway, it all worked out. And when I had that opportunity on the next go-round, I took it. And I took it against the advice of some because at the time, the notion was if you want to continue to have an upward trend on your career, you don't go from prime time into daytime. You come out of daytime and go into prime time. Well, it obviously worked for some other people, including Hasselhoff, obviously, who did Young and Restless for 6 years. Worked out for Johnny Stamos, with whom I worked for the first year or so that I did General Hospital.
Right.
Worked out for Ricky Dean Anderson, with MacGyver, and prior to that, Emerald Point Naval Air Base. It clearly was a changing world, just as the world then subsequently changed, where film actors didn't do TV.
Right.
But suddenly, when we had a strike and film actors had bills to pay, guess what? Film actors start doing TV.
Right.
And then some film actors find out they like having a regular paycheck. And they like knowing that when they finish the shoot, they've got the next one coming, So, and I was lucky enough that it was the number one show in daytime. I knew that it had obviously done huge numbers post Luke and Laura's wedding in '81, and I actually tested for a different character. I tested for Jimmy Lee Holt, which was a role that was later played by Steve Bond, even though I was hired before Steve.
Mm-hmm.
Because what happened is after the test, Gloria Monty called my agent and called Jen actually, and said, I had been looking for an actor for the last 2 years to do a storyline with that I don't want to discuss, but it required a certain quality that even though it's a very different character that Brian tested for, I see it in him. I want to create this character for him, and I want to do this storyline around him. And of course, what it was it was Grant Putnam, it was the DVX, it was the Russian Mole, it was subsequently a second Grant when the original Grant Putnam proves not to have been killed when he was thrown over a cliff. They had this whole thing blocked out that I didn't even know about when Glory hired me. So I got hired before they finally settled on Steve for Jimmy Lee Holt, which he did a great job with.
Yeah.
And then he began work, though, 3 weeks earlier than I did. I began in late January of '83, and he had begun the beginning of January, I believe. But, I still look back and I go, man, it was a really cool thing I had the opportunity to do. When I left it, I swore I was never going to do it. And I didn't leave it because they were underpaying me. I didn't leave it because I wanted more money. I didn't leave it. I just had, I felt, gone to the well as many times as you can. I'd done it 3 years. You work 4 or 5 shows a week. You're playing 2 characters for 9 months of it. It's like, how many times can you go to that well? Seriously, how do you keep showing up on screen and people give a damn on a daily basis? And I wanted to, spread my wings as an actor. I ended up doing 3 plays that first year, '86. I did a play in New York that, worked off Broadway at the Harold Clurman Theater. It's cool. I then did Henry Players, Summer Stock, Shenandoah with their names. And then I did, in Austin, Texas, I did the play Medea as a guest artist at St. Edward's College, where they had a guest artist program where you come in and work with the students and be, their exposure to a professional working actor's life and method. It was very good for me. And then the only reason I went back to General Hospital was I was approached 2 years later, and it was the hook was, it's just a 3-month storyline. You're going to come back as the bad guy, which was very inviting. You're going to kidnap Anna Devane, which was, I thought, a great gig. Finola's a terrific actress. And they also told me they'd give me a lot of latitude. Because one of the things that was important to me when we talked about it, I want the guy to have fun.
Yeah.
See, I don't want him to just be a glowering menace. I want him to be, Jack Nicholson has fun when he's fucking with you.
Yeah.
I wanted to be Grant Putnam's having fun while he's fucking with Anna Devane. And I do think that, I was given the opportunity to do some ad-libbing and improvisation, and Anna was, Finola was really good in that regard. I really had a great deal of fun doing that storyline. The other thing that I needed to know for my own gratification, and it wasn't like I'm coming back as a one-man band,
right?
But the show had slipped in the ratings from the number 1 that we were virtually every week. Occasionally, Young and Restless would bump us, occasionally. But we were number 1. And it bothered me to know that the show had slipped for over a year to number 2 to Young and Restless. and nothing personal against Young and Restless, but the competitive athlete in me just thought, well, fuck that, man.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can get this sucker back to number one. And I'm happy to say that for the sweeps period of February of '88, which is when it concluded. I mean, we literally finished on air the last day of sweeps in February. And the final 3 of those 4 weeks of February sweeps, we won. General Hospital won. And that was that was very gratifying. Bold and Beautiful was a whole different situation. I'd been 2 years kicking around trying to get a film career going.
Mm-hmm.
I had some heat going after the return to General Hospital because it did so well in the ratings. I got to play a character where I had a pretty broad range, and there was a lot of interest in what I could do in prime time, and all of a sudden the plug got pulled. What happened? The writers went on strike. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was the second time that I've been victimized by a strike, if you will,
mm-hmm.
going back to the summer of 1980 when the actors struck, and I certainly stood by it. But we went on strike. I think the strike officially lasted 12 weeks. It was 14 weeks before we resumed production on 8 Is Enough. And when we did, they knocked off 2 or 3 of the episodes that had originally been ordered because they'd ordered 24 or 25, and we ended up doing 22. So even there, you've been great if you're paid, on the basis of per episode, and you're guaranteed X number of episodes. Well, even if it's all episodes produced that you're guaranteed, if they don't produce them, you ain't paid for them. So
right.
I then had signed with a new manager, and this is 1989. And in the spring of '89, I'd met with the people and read for Bill Bell for a character on Bold and Beautiful. It was a new show.
Mm-hmm.
That was interesting to me. It wasn't New York based, so I could stay in L.A.
Mm-hmm.
Kathy and I had gotten together shortly before I did did the return to General Hospital. So I had a great relationship with the woman who was going to be my wife, and I didn't want to relocate. So the idea of going work a half-hour show, a much lighter workload. It's West Coast based. It's established, but it's not like a zenith. I thought it was a great opportunity to maybe, see what I could do, but we never agreed on the numbers. And I passed on the character that I was offered. It was later done by Jeff Conaway. And Jeff was on the show just under a year, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Sadly, he had a well-chronicled addiction issue.
Yeah.
He died pretty young also, man, so God, rest his soul. But it was around that time, not long after he had passed in 1990, that this new manager that I'd taken on said, hey, Brian, we got to get you a platform again. Out of sight, out of mind. And I mean, have you thought about daytime? I mean, General Hospital still. And I said, well, why don't you do this, man? Why don't you make a phone call over to Bold and Beautiful? Because a year ago, they had offered me the role that Jeff Conaway ended up taking. We didn't agree on the numbers, but that was then, this is now. Let's see what they might be willing to do. And I was actually very flattered because he made the phone call to Bill Bell's office on a Monday.
Mm-hmm.
By Wednesday, we had an offer. It was the same offer that I passed on the year before, but times have changed. It was a very good offer. It was way more than anybody had ever been paid coming into that show. And, by Friday, we had agreed to the deal. And initially, I thought, man, this is great. I had a scene fairly early on where I had a confrontation with Ridge Forrester, Ron Moss's character.
Right.
And it was a dynamic, powerful confrontation. It was him giving me, hey, you get out of my face, and I just was bang back on him like an Irishman with, no, I'll get in your face. And trust me, it was much more engaged than that. And it was real. It was a nice moment. In fact, I know it was a nice moment because within a week or two, CBS flew me back to New York to do the CBS morning show with Harry Smith and gosh, I wish I could remember the female host's name right now.
Mm-hmm.
But, Kathy and I flew back. Actually, CBS had provided that clip on the show. And I remember thinking, because I said it to Kathy when I came home that day, I said, yes, yes, yes. I don't need to be the lead on this thing. What I want to be is I want to be something of consequence.
Yeah.
And I'm perfectly happy to be the antagonist. I don't need to be the friggin' protagonist.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be the antagonist. If Ridge is your guy, very cool. He comes from the right side of the tracks. He's the Bell family, okay? They got all the money. And meanwhile, I'm playing Storm Logan, the Logan family with the single-parent background, mom who had to raise us, and hardworking and Irish stock, and had to work his way through school and then law school. I thought, cool, I like that. Man, I swear to God, that was the last episode I had anything worth a damn to do in.
Mm-hmm.
It was the last episode, and this was early on, and I was so bored to tears and frustrated. They were very nice people. The show was beautifully lit. I didn't think it had anywhere near the energy that General Hospital always did.
Right.
It was like beautiful people who hung around being beautiful. And one of the things that Gloria had done with daytime is she introduced a whole different pace. She introduced, location shooting. She introduced dynamism. And hey, I can't argue with the Bell family winning formula. My own half of Hollywood, I think. They own Bold and Beautiful outright, and they co-own with CBS Young and the Restless. And these shows will go on long beyond you and I. And I was really unfulfilled 7 months into a 3-year contract in the middle of a recession. This is 1990 in the fall. This is a recession we got going on.
Mm-hmm.
One that will ultimately end up costing Bush Sr. His gig in the White House.
Yeah.
And I was so bored that reading another disappointing script one night, I just looked over at Kathy, who was reading it with me, and I said, do you think it's premature if I ask out of this thing? And she's like the virtuoso patience. She goes long on anything and everything, man. She does not quit. And she just looked at me. She said, I can't believe it's taken you this long. And I asked to have a meeting with Bill Bell. He was very, very nice. I tried to be non-confrontational about it.
Mm-hmm.
Even put it in a football analogy, because sometimes the sports analogy works with the Hollywood crowd.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to him, hey, maybe an option quarterback playing in a drop back system. I'm so grateful for the opportunity you gave me. You gave me the same offer, and the offer sight unseen. You hadn't seen me in a year. You didn't ask me to come in. You didn't ask to put me on tape. I mean, I'm very, very grateful for the opportunity you gave me, but I would be equally or more so grateful if you would consider please letting me out. I know I've got a contract, but I would really like to pursue other options. And he was surprised. He said, well, you fill a void here, but if it leaves a void in your life, I said, well, it really does, Bill. It really does. And he said, well, why don't we agree to this? At the end of a year, as that year is coming to a close, if you're still unhappy, I'll let you out at that time. And sure enough, I mean, that year the clock was ticking, and it was like February of 91 that year was about to expire, and I hadn't heard anything from them. And I just went in, like 2 or 3 weeks to go on that year. I'd really like to take you up on that promise that you made in the fall. So they agreed to let me out.
Hey.
I'm a guy who has left a lot of money on the table over time, if you're catching this drift.
Yeah.
In other words, for a guy who didn't have a pot to piss in when he got to Hollywood in 1976, I got pretty cavalier with, and I'm happy to say I didn't have a drug habit, I didn't have a booze habit, I wasn't a gambler, I wasn't womanizing, it was not, I'm burning money anywhere, but
yeah.
Man, I passed up an awful lot of money because I had been introduced to the kind of legends of Hollywood where first of all, being a little bit of a bad boy wasn't a bad thing.
Yeah.
And where, you had to gamble. You had to gamble. There was something admirable about the gambling instinct, and when you weren't a slave to money. And I'd heard so much about these cats who passed on such and such, but if they hadn't passed on, they wouldn't have gotten. And I thought that maybe there's a measure of respect that you were accorded as a consequence. And now I just look back, I go, well, you were one stupid shit, weren't you? You would have had much bigger pensions in the Screen Actors Guild than AFTRA, which is now one union. You would have had bigger pensions, you would have had a bigger bank account. You could have just ridden this wave, man. I mean, if you look at it like that, I really misplayed my hand multiple times. By the same means, fortunately, I married the right woman. And Kay, my ex-wife, is a wonderful human being, brilliant, beautiful, great friend to us, terrific mother to our older son, Carrie, who's now 41.
Oh.
And a terrific stepmom, if you will, to Sean, who's 23. I mean, we have a great relationship with her. And, I just think with Kathy, the cool thing is that she, with her existence for a long time, having been really grounded in, strange term, but grounded in success on a 4-inch wide balance beam, you're used to risk-taking. You're used to a precarious life, if you will.
Right.
And I think I was well matched with someone who kind of fulfilled the Carl Wallenda maxim, and of course he was the pick of the flying Wallenda family, who died at, I think it was 73, on a fall from the high wire. They worked without a net.
Yeah.
And his famous saying was, life is on the wire, the rest is just waiting around. And so I do think I picked the right business in that regard. I couldn't have been a 9-to-5 guy. I tried that gig prior to. I even tried it for a time after we moved to Orlando. It's just not me. I don't care what my bank account had looked like. I don't care what I might have owned. I actually find that when we moved here, we scaled down. We've scaled down further. We are comfortable in the lives we live. We're very grateful for the opportunities we've had. Man, I look and go, how lucky did you get? How many times?
Yeah. How on earth did you get involved with Sleepaway Camp II?
Well, it was 1987, and it was one of those lulls in between General Hospital and return to General Hospital. I did a couple of low-budget movies. One in the spring that I'd done with Greg Evigan and Mitzi Capture called Sleepaway. No, that was called Private Road, No Trespassing.
Mm-hmm.
What was a thrill in that is, even though it was a low-budget film, I played George Kennedy's hapless son-in-law.
Mm-hmm.
So, I love that because I loved Cool Hand Luke, and of course he won an Academy Award for Cool Hand Luke.
Yep.
He was just a really cool dude. The older Hollywood guys were. I played Lloyd Bridges' son in Grace Kelly, the Grace Kelly story. Hollywood legend. I played Howard Keel's thug's son in a movie of the week, Heart to Heart movie of the week. These older school, real talented folks who came up, when you had a studio system, you were working all the time, you were applying your trade, they were always the best. They were always the best. So anyway, I had nothing going on at the time. It was late summer of '87. The only thing I had on the map at that point was I wanted to go run the Marine Corps Marathon in October. I'd gotten really into running in '85, and I wanted to go run the Marine Corps Marathon. Nothing else on my plate. I got approached about this. It was actually cast out of Los Angeles, and got the gig. I said, sure, cool. That times out well. I'll fly into Atlanta, and the location I'll be taken out to, and I'll get my gig done in about 3 weeks' time, and I can still do my running. And then I may even go straight up to D.C. and visit with some friends and then do the marathon. Little did I know I'd come really close to getting killed in doing Sleepaway Camp, because I got picked up at the airport, and I'd taken an early flight out of L.A. I was really tired. I mean, I'd gone to bed late the night before. I had to get to the airport for this early flight. You know, obviously, time difference of 3 hours that you lose. And I arrived, and I got picked up by a PA at the airport, a very nice young lady, but she was driving like a little Hyundai or something, okay? Mm-hmm. And I'm in the front seat, and I actually realized when we went through at my request to McDonald's that I could get something to eat. I was starving because I'd slept through. Even though I'd flown first class, I slept through the meal. You know, this was in the days when a first class meal was really a meal.
Yeah.
And it was like, man, no, I got to get some Z's here. I'm really whacked. And so she drove through the McDonald's, and I suddenly go, wow, you know what? I came really close to getting ejected from my '63 Corvette Stingray in July. I forgot. Yeah, we'd done the 8 Is Enough reunion movie. And in July, I'd gotten sideswiped coming off of the 101 freeway, the Hollywood freeway. Mm-hmm. A woman was busy putting on her mascara, looking in the mirror as we passed, okay? Mm-hmm. And next thing I know, I'm sliding along connected to her bumper. And like, holy shit, man, there's a ravine down to my right. And this is Victory Boulevard exit. And I'm thinking, this sucker is going to turn over. It was a roadster. Had the top down. I thought, I don't have a seatbelt on, and my ass is going to end up head first in that ravine, in the LA River culvert. And almost miraculously, her car slid sideways into a light pole. That disconnected us. The Corvette now spun away and ended up facing the wrong way on the exit ramp. And I was fine, except my head had hit, those old vent windows on, convertibles where they had framing around the vent window. So you had the main window, and then you had the little triangular vent window. And there was a, chrome frame that would go around those. Well, my head had hit that, so I'm bleeding pretty profusely from the head, but I'm alive. So having survived that, I don't know how in hell I hadn't made the decision in Atlanta to immediately buckle my seatbelt. But I realized when we got to McDonald's, holy shit, man, you don't have your seatbelt on. I put my seatbelt on, and we have just driven away from McDonald's, 45-mile-an-hour limit. We're going 50, maybe a little more, a little less, whatever. But, we're driving along, and I have just taken the first bite of the Big Mac that I got. Okay? Mm-hmm. Took a bite of the Big Mac, and I look up, and it's like in my mind's eye, I just go, holy shit. A car has turned directly into our path doing a left turn. Mm-hmm. And this is, it turns out, a car full of teenagers who've stolen a vehicle that they're joyriding in. Yeah. And the young lady who's driving the car I'm in, understandably and yet in a somewhat panicked state, turns the wheel away from her. So you right front corner, which is passenger side, slams into this vehicle. And honest to God, brother, I mean, my seatbelt, the shoulder harness part, it felt like the worst I'd ever been hit and had the wind knocked out of me. It was like tenfold that. It ended up breaking a couple of the ribs, as it turned out, but it was insane how significant that impact was. And I was really fit at the time, as I said. I mean, I'd had a great 10-mile run the day before at Lake Hollywood, the Hollywood Reservoir. Yeah. And I was cooking. And I couldn't even get a word out because I couldn't catch my breath. And this young lady is sobbing, and she's apologizing. I'm trying to explain, it's not your fault. I'm trying to console her. And then I unbuckle the belt, and I look down. I've got a big tear in my T-shirt. And I'm thinking, man, what the fuck? Did something go through the windshield and go through me or what? And I lift my shirt, and I'm looking for an entry wound. And I don't have an entry wound, but I immediately have blood that is infusing my chest in that cross pattern from the lap belt. And I can't speak. And now people are rushing over. The window is down, and my Big Mac is all over the front of the floorboard, and my right knee has gone through the dashboard, not the dashboard, the glove box. And I mean, and I had glasses on because when I sleep, I don't sleep in my contacts. So I had glasses on because I'd been sleeping on the plane. I've got the glasses have flown off. I can't see them. I can't find them. Got Big Mac everywhere. Guy, reaches in, this big dude with, big giant ass hand, and he puts his hand right on my chest, which hurts like hell. But he starts saying some kind of a prayer for me. Mm-hmm. And it's not in English, so he's giving me some, and I'm thinking, Christ, man, what is this, like last rites or what? Is this something I'm not seeing, that I'm dying here? And he's crushing my chest. Another guy looks in, and I hear him say to the people behind him, yeah, he flew up all over the car. And I can't even get out. Hey, motherfucker, I did not throw up. That's my goddamn Big Mac, okay? Yeah. And I'm really, it's like a fucking comedy, but it's not. And then, honest to God, a third voice, a woman's voice, says to me, aren't you Grant Putnam? Okay? and the EMTs, when they arrive, they have to use the jaws of life to get me out of the car because the door is folded back. They put me on a gurney. They first have to, a board first, because they have to immobilize my neck. They're concerned about, a whiplash injury and a spinal injury. They immobilize my neck. They put me on a board. Then they put the board on the gurney, and they put me in the back of an ambulance. And it's a beautiful September day in Atlanta, probably 80, 85 degrees, and they've got the doors open while they're, tending to the young lady's spine. And while I'm lying there on the gurney, and I can't move, a bee flies in the back of the ambulance and starts flying around my face. And it won't go away. I can't swat it away. My arms are pinned down. I can't move my head. And I'm just thinking, son of a bitch, I'm gonna get stung in the fucking eye by a bee because I was dumb enough to fly to Atlanta to work on a bee movie. What the hell was I thinking? Yeah. that was my intro to Sleepaway Camp Part 2.
Oh,
it was
man.
really nice when I got there. I was supposed to be working that day. They said, no, Brian, don't worry about that. I was like, oh, thanks, guys. I get to the motel where we're staying, and, I'm pretty shaken up. But, first I was taken to the hospital. Obviously, they wanted to make sure that I hadn't broken my sternum because of that massive pooling of blood. And my sternum was intact. It was only when I went to shift on the x-ray table that I go, wow, man, that I realized something was wrong with my left side ribs. And sure enough, I had a couple of ribs broken. I went back. I slept that night on whatever heavy-duty pain pills I was on. Yeah. Woke up the next day, and honest to God, I felt like I had been pinned to the wall and beaten all night. That's how bad it was.
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy, man. And believe it or not, I went from a guy who was just cooking 2 days earlier, running at Lake Hollywood Reservoir, to a guy who had to drag his ass out the door just to see if I could move, because I know that you will heal better if you can move. If, I didn't have anything that precluded me from moving, so I went and I ended up, it was about a mile in each direction. I jogged like a mile out and a mile back on the main road that this motel was off of. And it was probably the ugliest mile in the history of anyone, in the history of jogging, road racing, or anything else. But it felt so good just to be able to move. And ended up having a wonderful time on Sleepaway Camp Part 2. Walter was a doll, and Pam couldn't have been any nicer. Yeah. And it was really fun with the young kids. They were all young, and they all had aspirations of careers. And I was lucky enough at that juncture in time that I kind of had a career. And so it was, it was a blast. I was, again, given a lot of latitude. Michael Simpson, the director, gave me a lot of latitude with things. The kids were fun. I still, don't understand why exactly Pam had to throw that battery acid in my face. I thought I was a pretty nice guy. I could have could have not laughed at the photo, and stuff like that. But that was Sleepaway Camp Part 2, which is kind of funny because I'm surprised that as many people as we do occasionally hear from about Sleepaway Camp Part 2 even know of something that was done in such relative obscurity 34 years ago.
Yeah, I mean the whole franchise of Sleepaway Camp is huge at the horror conventions and stuff. I know the original Angela Felissa Rose, and she revels in her cult status from that movie. And Pam, she won't do the conventions. And the Felissa's never met Pam. She would love to someday. But my dad, I mean, he went to high school with Pam, and he loved her. I reached out to her a couple of years ago, and she said, "Tell your dad I said hi. He was the nicest guy I knew when I lived in the Bay Area."
That's very cool. Yeah, that's very cool. Well, I have not. I did reach out to her recently through her photography site.
Right.
She's married to Bobby Roth.
Yeah.
And I know she's got a daughter. I think her daughter's probably about 3 or 4 years younger than our 23-year-old Sean. And it was many, many years ago when she was probably 5 or 6 that I had connected with Pam, and she'd sent a photo of Ruby, her daughter, very pretty young lady. But I mean, she was a sweetheart to work with, and there was no presumptuousness or anything else. It's like you have a name like Springsteen. It's like kind of inevitable that somebody's going to go, "Are you any relation to?"
Yeah.
But it was very funny because, as anybody who's ever worked with me knows, I hear 2 or 3 words and accuse a song in my head, and the song is almost always going to come out of the 60s or early 70s rock and roll. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just do it. I'll walk around singing all day. I have no delusions about being a singer, but I find it distracting. I find it entertaining, at least for me. And Pam was nice enough to put up with that bullshit. And when we finished shooting, outer wherever it was where we were in the outskirts of Atlanta, we then moved into Atlanta itself. And the group of us went out one night to a little like a Cafe 50s diner and sock hop and dance floor and so on. And I was out on the dance floor with Pam, and of course I'm doing my singing along with whatever the hell was on the whatever it was that was spinning. And when that song stops, all of a sudden one of Bruce's songs come on. Mm-hmm. Now I know Bruce's music, and I know he's the boss, and I know like everybody loves Bruce, and I know he's a phenomenal performer, always gives an audience what they're looking for. And I actually had met Max Weinberg in New York when I was doing that play, because we just had an afternoon show that it was an interesting lineup. I'd done his morning show, and he asked if I would guest on the afternoon as well, and it was Max Weinberg, Michelle Phillips, with whom I shared a limo ride from the west side to the east side, and me. And man, what a thrill it was for me, because I played drums like a hack. But this is Max Weinberg, man. I mean, I know this guy's a great, great drummer. And so it wasn't like I was ignorant of Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band, but I don't know and love their music. I love everything about his commitment to the working class hero, if you will, Lennon's song.
Right.
The working stiff. I love his passion for his roots. I love his politics. But I didn't know his music. And it was very apparent when the song came on, and I went from singing up a storm while Pam and I are dancing to, I'm suddenly a mute. And she looks at me and very sternly points a finger in my face, and she goes, "I want to hear every word." It's like, Pam, I'm sorry, I'm busted. I don't know. Can we do Born in the USA? I know that. I don't know the lyrics, but I know Born in the USA.
Yeah.
So, I mean, she was very cool about things, man.
Yeah, she's great. I was supposed to interview Bobby back in January. I didn't even know that they were married until just recently. And Bobby, he kind of exuded a little bit of type A, and so then I ended up passing on it ultimately. But maybe if I had I known that he was married to Pam, maybe I could have brought it up, and maybe he could have been a little bit nicer. But it happens. I run into this stuff all the time.
That's a shame to hear, man, because
Yeah.
she was so nice and so unaffected.
Yeah.
I do know that he is a Beverly Hills product.
He's he's a subversive nonconformist too. He's an artist, as a director.
Yeah. I can remember, I think the name of his first independent film was The Boss. Ironically, I think it was called The Boss.
Yeah.
And I saw it at a screening. If that's not the name, I do remember seeing the film. And I remember he was a Beverly Hills product, and he was kind of connected with Beverly Hills folks. My ex-wife grew up in Beverly Hills, and she was 2 years older than I. I think she was just around the same age. And the people she'd grown up with went on and had success in the business, not necessarily as performers, but Jordan Kerner, who went on and had a lot of success as a producer, then was North Carolina School of the Arts dean. The guy was a brilliant guy. He was a Stanford joint MBA and JD, with whom we were friendly for a long time, or so I thought, until suddenly I was no longer on his radar.
Yeah.
That's Hollywood, man. That's Hollywood. And so I do remember going to that screening. I remember it was Bobby's film. I think it was screened at, it might have been the Directors Guild. It might have been at the Solari Theater. But, I remember he was some hot young guy who was going to have a major, film writing and directing career. I don't know whether it has or hasn't been. We actually saw his most recent offering. I'm trying to remember what the hell the name of it is, because Kathy's teammate, Julianne McNamara, her niece, Larson, what the hell's Larson's last name, Kath? I'm trying to remember. Yeah, Larson Thompson. Larson Thompson plays the lead in this thing. And we saw it online. I didn't even realize until we watched it that it was Bobby Roth who had, written and directed it. So I know he's still working, and Pam did the photography,
right.
And Patty, her sister-in-law, did some of the original music. So certainly you got some talented people involved in that. But I know Pam has become a very successful photographer.
Oh yeah, she's done headshots for Tom Hanks and big names like that.
Yeah. No, she's had great success. Does a lot of album covers, a lot of promotional art, and good for her. Yeah, it's a shame that you didn't have a better experience with him.
Oh, don't worry. There's plenty of other people who have broken my heart even worse. So don't worry about it.
Well, that's how you know you're in the business, brother.
Exactly. So are you fully retired from acting?
Yeah. I was basically fully retired in 2014. I think I mentioned to you that Sean was going into his sophomore, it was like January-ish, so it was coming up on his sophomore track season, and he'd had a lot of success as a pole vault as a freshman, and I knew that he was going to be in the thick of the hunt for the state title if things went well, and I had an agent in Winter Park who, I didn't regularly seek employment, but I had done some work since I'd been here. And if it was a project I was interested in and it was convenient and I didn't have to go somewhere unduly distant, I was interested in working still. But I had suddenly just started passing on everything she was sending me. And she, reached out to me. She said, why is it you keep passing on every audition? And I said, well, it's coming up on track season. And she said, well, what exactly does that mean? I said, well, you'll recall I've got a son who's a pole vaulter, and I think he has a really good chance of winning a state championship this year as a sophomore, and I don't want to miss any of his meets. I want to go to all of his meets, and that includes the Florida relays in Gainesville and Tallahassee for the FSU relays, and he's got meets. I want to be able to go to all of his meets. And she was kind of surprised because that's not, and certainly once upon a time in my career, that wouldn't have been my response, but it was really where my heart and passion was. And Kathy, because she was still doing broadcasting as she is to this day, she still had some meets that overlapped with some of his meets. Only one of us could actually go with him to some of those outings. and I wanted to make sure that I was available. I didn't want to be on location somewhere. I didn't want to be obligated somewhere. And, I was more than happy to say I've had a good run of it. The only thing subsequent to that moment in time in fact, ironically, I was supposed to do one more episode of Drop Dead Diva, and I'd been booked for it, and it was a pretty crazy schedule because I was driving up to Atlanta. What they would do is they'd give you a travel allowance in addition to the per diem, and I would just rent a car because I found, a 7.5 hour drive. I found it a lot easier to drive, have a car, not have to wait at an airport, not have to wonder about flights being on time or not. I would drive, I'd listen to the radio, and I'd do my thing. And I was just past Gainesville, so a couple of hours north of us, and I don't even know why, but I made a phone call to the casting director, good guy, and I said, hey, bro, I just want to let you know I'm en route now. I look forward to seeing you again. Maybe you guys can set aside tomorrow night. I'd love to take you out to dinner. And he said, well, wait a second, didn't one of the ADs get a hold of you? I said, well, no. He goes, oh, Brian, God, our lead got sick, and she's not going to be able to work, tomorrow. And in fact, we've pushed the scene back so that now the stuff you're going to shoot, we're going to shoot on Friday. And I go, whoa, man, I can't do it. I said, I can't do it. I was literally driving up. I was going to do it. I was going to hopefully take you guys out to dinner, and I was going to get up at 5 o'clock the next morning and drive straight back. And I was going to pick up my son to drive him up to Tallahassee for the FSU relays. And of course, he felt terrible. He said, oh, God, I can't believe. I said, no, I'm really sorry. I can't do the gig. I can't do it. And he said, well, of course we'll pay you. And they did. I said, well, I'm not even really concerned about that, but I can't do it. So that was, that was 2013. And then 2014, I just started passing things. I did work on a thing in May of 2017 called Killer Island. Mm-hmm. It came out of the blue, B-movie fare, very nice people. And what was enticing there is that they were shooting on Captiva Island. I'd never been there. Mm-hmm. Kathy had been out of town while I'd taken care of the animals here. Sean was in his freshman year of college. He was having a very successful, fortunately not just academically, but very successful freshman year as a collegiate vaulter. He ended up as an All-American. And, because she was going to some of his meets that I couldn't go to, she was coming back the same day I had to leave for Captiva Island, so I went and spent 9-10 days on Captiva Island. I came back, and then we both got to fly off to Oregon, see our son vault at Nationals in Eugene, University of Oregon. And so that was kind of an out of the blue thing. I've still never watched the film. I know it's available on Amazon. I didn't get a print of it, but I'll watch it someday. And they're very nice people, but other than that, I'm happy to say that I got to go to every single one of Sean's track meets, and he did, in fact, win a state championship that year. And he was the first sophomore to do it in pole vault in 29 years. Mm-hmm. And he won 3 state championships, sophomore, junior, senior year. And that kind of stuff, to me, is much more of a memory than, obviously, some great memories that I have from the industry.
Have you ever thought about writing a memoir? Because you got a lot of good stories.
Oh, thanks, brother. I guess I have been told I should write one. I have been told that. I don't know. I kind of like having the stories, and maybe I exist in the wrong century, and I should have been part of the oral tradition in like the 1600s or something. I just feel like everybody's got stories. And my story is one of the things I would never want to do is I would never want to, badmouth anybody. Even Shatner, I'd just say I got lucky not working with him for 4 years. Honest to God, I so much of an extreme that I don't know how the guy keeps landing on his feet. It's like, And I understand his character, Boston Legal. I didn't watch the show, but I know he's perfect for the character based on what I do know. So, hey, was it typecast, or did you make suggestions as it went along?
Yeah, I mean, outside of TV, his whole movie career was like B-movie crap. I don't think without Star Trek he would, be as successful as he is. I really believe that.
Yeah. That and his original marriage to Marcy Lafferty, whose father was one of the Monkey Mucks, one of the head honchos at ABC, I know, among other things, Perry Lafferty. He certainly used that connection.
Well, Brian, I want to thank you so much for coming on today, and I really hope your surgery goes well tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you, Tommy. Thank you. I'm confident it will. I really welcome the surgery. I hope you never have a joint go so bad on you, much less so suddenly that it just really needs to go. But I've been there for 3 months, so I can't wait to have it taken out.
I got 12 surgeries out of my car accident, so I'm way ahead of you.
God. Oh, man. I know you had a devastating accident, but you sure don't seem to have the attitude of the guy who went through so much. 12 surgeries, good Lord.
It's still early.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to tally it up on you yet. Would you like me to keep the tab open?
Yeah.
Yes, please. We'll be ordering more.
Brian, thank you so much, and please, God bless and stay safe.
God bless you, brother. You take care now.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye, brother.
Well, there you have it. Brian Patrick Clarke. Ain't he a cool dude? Oh, what a nice guy. And I hope his surgery goes well tomorrow. He is a very blessed guy. And he's got great stories. Well, until next time, this is Tommy Throwback Kovac saying, there's no shame in living in the past, because the present sucks. Later, dudes.